Nobody expected this. The rumors had been quiet. The dirt sheets had nothing. Her old character, the smiling hero, the one who high-fived children and sold colorful merchandises, gone. It was replaced in a single night with a dark, dangerous new persona that shocked the entire WWE Universe. The fog burst open, the pyro blasted upward, and she walked out transformed. She is back. And this 2025 repackage might be the craziest twist WWE has ever pulled. But to understand why the arena went silent, we have to look past the makeup and the lights. We have to look at the human cost of becoming a monster. The arena was buzzing with a typical energy. It was the kind of noise you get used to when you watch wrestling for years, a mix of anticipation and casual chatter. Fans were expecting the usual heavy hitters. They were expecting the music they knew, the entrances they had memorized, and the comfort of nostalgia. But then, the lights didn't just dim, they were severed.
Ow.
It wasn't a technical glitch. It was a plunge into total, suffocating blackness. For 10 seconds, 20,000 people sat in a void. There was no Titantron video, no catchy guitar riff, just the sound of air handling units humming in the rafters. In that darkness, the audience wasn't just waiting, were being reset. The smiling superstar they knew, the girl next door who had carried the women's division on her back with grit and determination, was effectively dying in that silence. We often forget that for a wrestler to be reborn, their past self has to be sacrificed. The merchandise that fans were wearing in the front row suddenly felt outdated, artifacts of a timeline that was about to be erased. Then came the sound. Not music, but a low, guttural frequency that rattled the chest. It was uncomfortable. It was designed to unsettle. Single purple spotlight cut through the gloom, hitting the top of the stage. Smoke began to pour out. Not the quick bursts of steam we are used to, but a thick, heavy fog that rolled down the ramp like a landslide. The atmosphere shifted from excitement to genuine confusion. This wasn't a sporting event anymore. It felt like the opening scene of a psychological thriller. And in the center of that fog, a silhouette finally emerged. She walked slowly. The pace was deliberate, almost predatory. The contrast was jarring. Gone were the bright neons and the athletic tape. In their place was tattered leather, dark muted tones, and a hood that cast a shadow over her eyes. As she stepped into the clearer light, the camera zoomed in. The makeup wasn't about vanity, it was war paint. Dark lines ran down her cheeks like tears of oil. Her eyes, usually wide and expressive, were blank, staring through the lens and into the living rooms of millions. The commentary team, usually quick with superlatives and catchphrases, fell into a stunned silence. This is a rare moment in modern wrestling. Usually they are fed lines, told to sell the excitement. But here, the shock was genuine. They didn't know what to call her. Was this still the same person? The visual storytelling was immediate and brutal. She wasn't here to compete for a championship. She was here to dismantle the system that created her. She didn't pose. She didn't look at the hard cam to taunt the audience. She simply walked to the ring stairs and stopped. The silence in the arena was heavier than any booing or cheering could ever be. It was the silence of people trying to process a trauma. A child in the front row, wearing her old t-shirt, lowered a sign that said, "Welcome back." It was a heartbreaking image that encapsulated the shift. The hero was dead. The woman who stood on the apron looked down at the canvas, not with ambition, but with disdain. This wasn't just a character change. It felt like a public breakdown, stylized and televised for the world to see, blurring the uncomfortable line between performance art and reality. The moment she stepped through the ropes, the digital world ignited. We live in an era where reaction is instantaneous, and the internet became a chaotic mirror of the confusion inside the arena. Within minutes, her name was trending worldwide. But the sentiment wasn't the usual, "This is awesome" chants. It was fear. It was concern. Twitter threads unraveled with theories. Was she turning heel? Was this a supernatural gimmick? Or was this something darker, a reflection of real-life frustrations with the company? Screenshots of her blank, hollow stare circulated instantly. People began dissecting the details of her attire. They noticed symbols that hinted at past storylines, twisted and corrupted. The online wrestling community, usually divided, was united in sheer bewilderment. Video essays were being scripted in real time. Engagement metrics were through the roof, but the tone was different. It wasn't the celebration of a return. It was the morbid curiosity of a car crash. What made this viral moment so potent was the lack of context. WWE didn't drop a press release. They didn't have a commentator explain her motivations. They let the image sit there, festering on timelines. Fans who hadn't tuned in for months were suddenly tagging their friends, asking, "Have you seen this?" It proved that in 2025, shock value still holds currency, but only if it feels dangerous. The algorithm loves mystery, and she had become the biggest mystery in entertainment. The comments section became a war zone of interpretation, with some praising the artistic risk and others mourning the loss of a role model. It was the perfect storm of engagement, driven entirely by a single, silent walk to the ring. While the internet screamed, the backstage area went quiet. In the world of professional wrestling, the locker room is a shark tank. Every wrestler is fighting for screen time, for the main event spot, for the merchandise bonus. When a star returns with this level of production and impact, it sends a wave of anxiety through the roster. You could imagine the other talent gathered around the monitors in the gorilla position, watching their own relevance be threatened by this new entity. The reaction among peers is rarely just awe. It is a complex cocktail of professional jealousy and artistic respect. They knew the risk she was taking. Changing a gimmick that works is gambling with your career. If this dark persona failed, she would be a joke. If it succeeded, she would take the top spot everyone else was fighting for. The younger talent looked on with intimidation. The veterans looked on with calculation. They were already mentally choreographing how they would work a match with this new version of her. There is also a tangible fear of the unknown. Wrestling relies on trust. You have to trust your opponent with your body. But looking at her on that monitor cold, detached, moving with a jagged unpredictability, the other wrestlers questioned if that trust still existed. Was she going to wrestle safely, or was this character going to bring a stiffness, a violence that blurred the lines? The locker room is a family, but it is a dysfunctional one. Her return didn't feel like a family reunion. It felt like a predator had been reintroduced to the ecosystem, and everyone else suddenly realized they were just prey. High above the arena floor, in the glass-walled offices of the executives, a different kind of drama was unfolding. The creative team and the network suits were likely in a heated debate. You see, the previous version of this wrestler was a safe investment. She sold lunchboxes. She was the face of charity campaigns. She was brand-friendly. This new persona, this nightmare in leather and smeared paint, this was a marketing risk. Sponsors get nervous when things get too dark. There were undoubtedly emails flying back and forth about whether this new character was advertiser-friendly. Can you put that face on a toy? Can you put that image on a poster at a Walmart? The conflict between art and commerce is the eternal struggle of the WWE. The writers wanted to push the envelope. To tell a story of corruption and dissent, the sales department wanted numbers they could predict. But as the social media numbers poured in, the panic turned into a greedy excitement. Controversy creates cash. They realized that while they might lose the family demographic, they were capturing something more elusive, the lapsed fan. The 8 and 234 demographic that craves edgy, mature storytelling was hooked. The boardroom panic shifted from "how do we fix this?" to "how do we exploit this?" They began scrambling to print new shirts, dark and gritty designs that abandoned the bright colors of the past. It was a chaotic pivot. The machine of the WWE had to turn its gears in reverse, embracing the darkness they usually tried to sanitize. It showed that even the corporate giants are at the mercy of a singular, powerful performance. The following week, the world tuned in, expecting an explanation. The segment was placed in the main event slot, a testament to the impact of her return. She stood in the center of the ring, the microphone trembling slightly in her black-gloved hand. The crowd was screaming for her to speak, to give them the why. Why did you change? Why did you abandon us?
Oh.
The pressure in the arena was palpable. But she didn't launch into a typical wrestling promo. There were no catchphrases. She didn't insult the local sports team to get cheap heat. Instead, she spoke in a whisper that forced the audio engineers to crank the volume, causing a hush to fall over the thousands in attendance. "The girl you knew," she murmured, her voice cracking with a mix of sorrow and rage, "was a lie you forced me to tell." That single sentence dismantled years of history. It wasn't just a scripted line. It felt like an indictment of the industry and the fans themselves. She accused them of consuming her happiness for their entertainment. It was a psychological attack. She dropped the microphone, not with a thud, but with a gentle release, as if she was done explaining herself. The refusal to yell, the refusal to play by the rules of engagement, made her terrifying. It signaled that she wasn't there to be a villain in a play. She was there to be a mirror to the audience's own toxicity. The segment ended not with music, but with a fade to black, leaving the viewer alone with her accusation. The most fascinating aspect of a transformation this extreme is what happens when the cameras turn off. We often forget that underneath the persona is a human being living out of a suitcase, driving rental cars from city to city. For her, maintaining this level of darkness requires a toll. You cannot inhabit a headspace of pain and anger for millions of people without it bleeding into your real life. Imagine the phone calls home. How does she talk to her parents or her partner after portraying a psychological breakdown on national television? The lines between the person and the character begin to blur. This is the method acting of the wrestling world. To sell the shock, she likely had to isolate herself backstage, wearing headphones, avoiding the jokes and camaraderie of the catering area. She had to live in the shadow she created. Reports would later surface of her staying in character even at the airport, wearing dark sunglasses and refusing to sign autographs. Not out of arrogance, but out of a commitment to the aura. This dedication comes at a price. It alienates friends. It confuses family. The emotional hangover after an adrenaline dump like that is severe. Sitting in a hotel room in Des Moines or Memphis, wiping off the black paint, staring at the face in the mirror, does she recognize herself? Or has the mask become the face? The commitment to shocking the world in 2025 meant sacrificing the comfort of her own identity. Success in wrestling is a lonely mountain. As this new persona gained traction, becoming the hottest act in the industry, the isolation deepened. Success breeds resentment, and a dark character gives people an excuse to keep their distance. Her peers didn't know how to approach her anymore. The locker room banter stopped when she entered. She had built a wall of mystique so high that nobody could climb it. She became a prisoner of her own invention. To keep the shock value alive, she couldn't be seen smiling on Instagram. She couldn't be seen having coffee with the baby faces. She had to curate a life of solitude to protect the investment the company had made in her. This is the unseen tragedy of the shocking return. We cheer for the character, but we isolate the human. The scriptwriters handled her with kid gloves, afraid to break the spell. The producers gave her space. She was operating on an island. While the merchandise sales skyrocketed and the YouTube views hit the millions, the human connection dwindled. It is a cold reality that to be the most talked about person in the room often means being the loneliest. The darkness she projected in the ring wasn't just theatrical. It was fueled by the very real solitude that her ambition required. She had shocked the world, yes, but in doing so, she had stepped into a void where few could follow. The story culminated at the next major pay-per-view. The match was set against the top champion, the symbol of everything she used to be. The bell rang, and the violence that followed was unlike the technical wrestling clinics of the past. It was a brawl. It was ugly. She didn't use wrestling holds. She used strikes, clawing and erratic movements that made the audience wince. This wasn't about winning a belt. It was about destroying an ideal. She took punishment and laughed, a disturbing visual that unsettled the referee. Every time she was knocked down, she rose up faster, like a horror movie villain. The commentary team sold the narrative that she was unstoppable because she no longer cared about pain. She had abandoned the rules of self-preservation. The climax wasn't a finishing move. It was a moment of hesitation. She had the champion beaten, prone on the mat. The old version of her would have gone for the pin. The new version paused. She looked at her hands, then at the crowd. She picked up the champion, not to slam her, but to whisper something in her ear. Then, she simply walked away. She accepted a count-out loss. The bell rang, but it didn't matter. She had proven her point. The title belt was a prop. Her dominance was psychological. She left the champion crying in the ring, not from physical pain, but from the violation of the encounter. It was a masterclass in anticlimax, denying the fans the satisfaction of a clear winner. And then, the twist. The aftermath that nobody saw coming. In the weeks that followed, the narrative shifted. Annals, fans expected her to spiral deeper into madness, to become a demon. But in a final backstage vignette, she sat in front of a mirror, the camera recording from a distance. She began to wipe the makeup off. She looked into the lens, her face half clean, half monster. "You thought this was darkness," she said, her voice steady and calm for the first time in months. "You were wrong. The smile I wore for 5 years, that was the mask. This anger, this is the first time I've been real. The shock wasn't that she had turned evil. The shock was that her evil persona was actually her authentic self, liberated from the expectations of being a role model. The darkness wasn't a corruption. It was a protection. It was a suit of armor that allowed her to survive the industry. Fans realized they hadn't been watching a villain turn. They had been watching a woman reclaim her autonomy. The spooky theatrics, the fog, the silence, it was all just a way to clear the noise so she could finally hear herself think. She didn't return to being a hero. She didn't stay a monster. She became something far more dangerous to the status quo. A person who no longer cared what anyone thought. And that is the true shock of 2025. In a world of characters, she dared to be real, and it terrified everyone. Wrestling is often called a soap opera, but sometimes it cuts closer to the bone than any drama. Her transformation wasn't just a storyline. It was a mirror held up to the pressure of legacy and the price of fame. She shocked us not with pyrotechnics, but with the brutal truth that sometimes, to find yourself, you have to destroy who everyone else wants you to be.